The Real Talent Podcast is brought to you by The Agency, Australia's real estate. Welcome to the Real Talent Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Wood from The Agency, and this podcast is where we deep dive into the minds of Australia's top performing agents with one focus: listing strategy. From winning the appraisals to mastering vendor communication, we break down exactly how the best in the business are securing more listings and growing their market share. No fluff, no guesswork, just real insights, real tactics, and real results, straight from the agents who are doing it every day. Let's get started. Well, welcome to another episode of the Real Talent Podcast. I'm very excited about today's episode because I get to interview an agent who I've worked alongside with and also competed against most recently in Zali Reynolds. Zali, welcome to the Real Talent Podcast.
Hey, Woody, how you going?
Very good, very good. Thank you for coming in and I guess delivering us your time. One thing we love to do in this podcast is get straight into it. So I'm going to get straight into the questions. And you're a shining example as to someone who rose through the ranks of real estate at a fast pace, but also at a young age. And I think that's one of the, I guess, appeals of our listeners and audience is that a lot of agents who are listening will be younger agents who are wanting to improve. Right from the outset, tell me about how your career developed in a very competitive marketplace in Boroondara and how you structured yourself to fast track and break into that marketplace.
Yeah, I think in terms of structure, I was very I hired a PA pretty quickly. So I think I was only in sales, a standalone sales agent for 6 months before I hired my first PA.
Yep.
I will always remember a line, I think it was Matt LaHood, he said, if you don't have a PA, you are a PA. And so that was something I did really, really quickly. Initially it was part-time, then it went to full-time. So I was always trying to outsource the admin side of the business to make sure I was focusing on prospecting, listing, selling. So that's the structure of how I did it. It did take a lot of guts. You know, a lot of people say, well, I can't afford to hire a PA. I couldn't afford to hire a PA either. But I also thought I can't afford not to if I want to be successful in the business. Because at the end of the day, what brings the money in is the listing. It's not, you know, producing the letters, doing the compliance and the admin. So that structure was really important. And I also think, you know, early in my career, I definitely outworked everyone.
And when you say outworked everyone, what was the focus? Was it phone calls? Was it letterbox drops? Was it door knocking? Was it all of the above? What was the main listing source for you early on?
Yeah, it was all of the above. I did not come from the area that I work in. I didn't go to school there. I didn't know anybody. So it was really about making sure that as many people as I could find were, you know, knew who I was, knew what I did, and wanted to actually just let me in the door. So that was phone calls. It was letterbox drops. It was door knocking to a certain extent. I hate door knocking, but, you know, it's still an important thing to do. And I absolutely did do a lot of it. So it was all of it. And it was making sure that I hit the numbers, you know, every day, every week, and just not stopping work until the numbers were hit.
I think real estate now has changed a lot by way of even if you look at the rankings, every year there's more and more females entering those REB rankings and being at the top of the list on those rankings. And that probably wasn't the case when you entered the industry. It was obviously, for a long time, it was a male-dominated industry. How did you break the mold of that? Because you were really one of the pioneers in terms of one of the leading female agents, and particularly at a young age.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish I could answer that question. I don't know the direct answer to it. I had a real motivation to be successful for various reasons. And so there was just no option, you know, there was no turning back. Like it was talked a little bit about at ARIC this year, and, you know, you've probably heard it in other podcasts, you know, you've got to burn the boats.
Yep.
You know, you can't have a plan B. I didn't have the option of a plan B. I never had the option of, you know, going back to a previous career. I never had the option of going to my parents for money. It just had to happen. There was just, so you just push through.
And with your calls and door knocks and letter drops, what would you say from an agent who's entering the industry now, what would you say a standard is that needs to be adhered to be successful in terms of numbers of calls, letterbox drops? I know we'll get to farming in a short time because that's something you're very strong on, but what would a minimum standard be to be successful?
Well, I think the minimum standard that everybody talks about is 100 calls a week. And, my letterbox dropping was always 6 streets a week.
Yep.
So that's what I started on. I actually don't think that can be your minimum anymore. I think I look at the competition in our area, and making 20 calls a day is something that everybody does.
Yep.
So I actually think that the stats have changed and need to change if you want to be successful. I think that what you need to do is focus on face-to-face meetings.
Yep.
Because they're the key. So a lot of agents these days just rely on how many calls they make, how many letterbox drops they do, and how many social media follows they've got, or how many text messages that they send. That is not going to get you in a door. So I really encourage my agents now to focus on face-to-faces, and that's what I focus on too. So even if that's someone who's not selling and I'm just catching up for a cup of tea with them, that's what I think you should be focused on. And minimum, you need to have, I want to say 5, but I really don't think that's enough. I think you need to have 5 appraisals a week, but realistically it probably should be 10 face-to-faces.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredibly powerful. I think, as you say, a lot of agents will pick up the phone and call, but that's where they leave it. They're not actually pushing the issue or the relevance to stay relevant to that particular client, and the face-to-face meetings will do that. Going back to your breakthrough into the marketplace as a younger agent at the time, what were some of the points of difference you used? Because I think a lot of agents fall into the trap of listening to trainers or speakers who are more experienced, and a lot of agents use the same points of difference. We've got a great database.
Yeah.
We've got a big network. And you've had the, benefit of working at a more boutique agency, which you own now, Shelter Real Estate. But you've also worked at larger agencies at Marshall White and Jellis Craig as well. When you were early days, what were some of the key points of difference that you used to win listings?
I think that the thing that really got me across the line most of the time was purely my enthusiasm. And I think I exuded the want to get the best price for the vendor. Yep. So, I was showing them how I was going to get them the best price. I was explaining that, I don't have kids yet. I'm fully focused on making sure that I get you the best result, and just making them believe that I was going to work harder than anyone else. So it was really that excitement. It didn't work for every listing. There's no doubt about that. And as you grow, you get more listings and you're able to show them case studies and things like that. But I just think really that enthusiasm was what got me across the line.
And so it sounds like your listing process has changed over time. Initially, it's enthusiasm. Then you get the runs on the board, and your listing process changes to, I sell a lot of homes in the area. I work with a lot of buyers. I'm keen to delve into your listing process and how it's changed from a large real estate organization compared to now. Obviously, a boutique. I'm not saying you don't sell a lot of homes, you do, but has your pitch changed and your listing presentation changed from that respect?
Absolutely. I think, I've done all the training that most people have done. And when you go into a listing presentation, you're trained to talk about timing, value, presentation, advertising, and what needs to be done to the house. I think that's, the key kind of agenda that everybody goes with.
Yep.
I try not to look at that. I actually tailor every presentation to the client. So if I'm going into a listing presentation and I know that client well, or I've researched them enough, I know what they're going to want, and hopefully I also know what my competition is going to pitch. And so I actually go in with a plan of how I'm going to help them. Now, you need an example for that because that's very vague. For example, I listed a property last week, and the lady who is selling it, she's a widower, she's downsizing, she's had a good relationship with me. I've been in touch with her for many years, but she also had a very good relationship with another agent who she's been in touch with for many years. And I knew what was going to be really important to her, other than getting the best price, was having her hand held. Mm-hmm. So she didn't feel like she had any other support, to take her through that process. So my listing presentation was fully geared around how I was going to help her every step of the way to get to the end result. Her want was not the lowest commission. It wasn't even necessarily the highest price. It was to feel that she was going to be comfortable and be able to trust the person taking her through the process. So that's what I focused on. Having said that, there's another listing presentation or property that I listed late last week, and the gentleman who I listed there, he is a top performing salesperson in another industry. So he wants stats, figures. He wants to be sold to. He wants to know he's going to get the highest price. So it's a totally different listing presentation.
It's a tailored listing presentation. You're
Correct.
tailoring the listing presentation to that particular client. In a perfect world, because we've had speakers in the past talk about structure. So they talk about that listing structure. So I want to talk about timing first, then I want to talk about method of sale, followed by marketing, followed by value, followed by commission.
Yes.
Do you try to keep a structure like that? If it is, let's say, I know that there's tailored ones, but let's say it's a general listing presentation. Would you try to keep a structure like that?
I do have a structure. So I tend to work off the process. So I have a process or a calendar that I work through, and I then try and put points of difference into that calendar, I guess you can say. And those points of difference are different depending on the client that I'm going into.
Sure.
But I'm going to be frank with you, Woody. If you're going into a presentation and you're going off, timing, value, blah, 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 so is every one of your competitors.
Yep.
So, what makes you get the business? Lower commission or telling them the highest price?
Yep.
I don't want to be winning business on lowest commission or telling them the highest price. I want to tell them the truth and I want to earn a good fee.
Sure.
So, you need to put a little bit more work into it.
So you will use that structure, but also weave your points of difference into that structure throughout the course of the listing presentation.
Correct.
And so run me back through pre-listing. What does your pre-listing look like at the moment?
Yeah. So when I get the call, I try and have a really good conversation with them on the phone. And it's more about finding out what they want to achieve, like where they're going, why they're moving, what their timing is.
Yep.
So I've had a really good conversation with them on that first phone call. Once we've set the appointment, I send them a calendar invite and I also send them a follow-up email that has a couple of videos in it. So it's a video about myself if they don't already know me. If they do already know me, then I'll normally send a video about, what to consider when choosing an agent.
Okay.
Or sometimes I'll send both.
And that's important because I think every speaker we've spoken to so far has got a great pre-listing strategy.
Yeah.
You can't book an appointment, turn up to that meeting and have that be your first point of contact with that particular client.
Correct. You can't. And so, but the pre-list does depend on how long you've known them for. So you can't just send out, I hate sending, I've got standard letters and standard emails and all of that, but I always try and personalize it. So, you don't want it to just look like it's just something that you've kind of gone cut and paste.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of trying to find out who you're competing against if you are competing. Are you the same?
Yeah, absolutely. I will always try and find out.
Yep.
Sometimes people volunteer it. Sometimes people don't want to tell you. But I think it's important to know who you're against because that really does determine how your listing presentation will go and what key points of difference you're going to focus on.
For sure. And so what would you say to a young agent who doesn't have a lot of runs on the board, is coming up against more experienced operators? What should they say to clients? What should their points of difference be?
Well, it really depends on their personality and, the area that they're focusing on. So, when I was a younger agent, my points of difference were that I was going to work harder than anybody else. I really did focus on getting really strong results. So that was a huge point of difference. I knew the area better than anyone else. So area knowledge is absolutely crucial. I also got myself really connected into the community. So I knew the people that owned the local cafe. I knew the people who ran the PTA at the local school. So having those connections was something that I sold to vendors as being able to market their property in a cost-effective way, as in zero cost, to the community who might be looking to buy that type of property. If
you're listening to this, that is really, really critical information. It's not an agent sitting there saying, gee, we've got a big network. It's not an agent sitting there saying, we've got a really strong database. I think a lot of agents can fall into that trap. And what you've just articulated is some key fundamental points of difference that you would find maybe 1 in 10 agents would say at a listing presentation as opposed to every agent. I think one of the other things, talking about that product knowledge, one of the things that was very effective for me early on in my career was actually when you say knowing the area, explaining that in more detail to the client. So I'd sit there and focused a lot on Surrey Hills years ago. I'd sit there and say, look, I know that the 70 tram is up the road and it leaves at 8:12 to get the kids to Scotch along Riversdale Road. I know that Surrey Hills is an express station, which means you only stop 4 times between when you get on at Surrey Hills and then you get to the city. That information, when you can articulate that to a client, really shows that you know the area. And that's going to, I think, lead us into my next question to you, and that is farm areas.
Yes.
You are well renowned for focusing on obviously Glen Iris and Ashburton. You've done that for many, many years now. Would you say that is one of, if not the biggest factor in terms of propelling your career in the pace at which it did?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you say, the pace in which it did, like, people are overnight successes. It's not like it's taken a lot of effort.
Correct.
But definitely focusing on an area has been my strength.
Yep.
It's also allowed me, like, I'm super passionate about the area. I love the area. I work in the area. I, have lived in the area. I'm about to move back to the area. I'm passionate about it. I know everything about it. So I think that's really, really key. It's also allowed me to focus on, the particulars of each house. So, when someone calls me and says, I'm thinking of selling, this is my address, I can say, oh, that's the one with the blue fence. I just noticed you put out hard rubbish, or whatever it is, because I'm literally in the area all the time.
I guess that market saturation when they're seeing Zali Reynolds, that again becomes a reason for people to call you. What about post-listing? So let's say every agent has the same strategy, and that is try to list the property on the spot. It doesn't always work out that way. So what does your post-listing strategy look like?
Yeah. So I just try and build rapport as much as I can. So I think it's all trying to be about being personal and tailored. So if I leave the listing and it's an immediate seller, then obviously we'll send a proposal through on top of what we've already given them. So there's an email that they can actually, utilize and click the link and all of that. So that goes through to them. Depending on what their needs are, we'll provide tradespeople. We might get the stylist through, whether it's a handwritten note, whether it's a phone call with properties that might suit them. The list is absolutely endless, and we do have that list. Like, I've got a big list of all the things that we can do, and I really go through and go, okay, that and that and that is going to suit that particular client.
Do you invite them to your auctions?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We've had a mixture of speakers who are auctioneers and aren't auctioneers. You don't personally auction properties anymore. I know that we joke about the fact that you have done auctions in the past.
I've done two.
Two auctions, which is great. I'm the opposite. So I go into listing presentations and say it's imperative to have the auctioneer involved in the campaign. I'm your auctioneer. I'll be at every open for inspection, et cetera, et cetera. You probably have a much different sell. What does that sell look like for you?
So I can get my auctioneers involved. I've got 4 auctioneers who work in my business. And so if need be, I can tick off that criteria. What I am really good at, and, I hope this doesn't sound up myself, but I'm really good at, like, if you come to one of my auctions, you will see I'm really good at getting people to bid more. So that's being in the crowd and actually being able to get that extra, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And there's many examples of that where, potential clients have been to an auction and actually seen that happen. We had one on the weekend, in Glen Iris, and Todd was so close to knocking it down, and he'd been about to knock it down for like 5 minutes. And right at the end, I was like, stop. And I put my hand up and the whole crowd gasped and looked at me, and we got another 20. So, the buyer actually said to me, you cost me 20K, Zali. And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry, but let me sell your house and I'll get
that's
that.
My job.
Yeah, that's my job. So I try and give examples to potential vendors in the listing presentation of how that occurs and how I'm really passionate about doing that.
Yep.
And then, I have got a great auctioneer. I've got 4 great auctioneers, and they're there to do the job and run the show. But what I'm there to do during your campaign is build rapport with the buyers so that on auction day, when they're nervous, when the adrenaline's pumping, and when I say to them, now's the time to bid an extra $20,000, they listen to me because I've built that trust.
Yeah. And look, you believe it, so it's compelling, right? You have lived it, you've seen it, you've seen the effects of it. And I think that from a listing tool, I always recommend probably trying to invite them to a more competitive auction as opposed to one that's not going to be as competitive. But I think that with the conviction in the way that you say that, I sit here and go, well, of course, that's compelling.
But I know it. I know, I can give multiple examples where I know if I wasn't there in the crowd, that price would have been $20,000 less, $50,000 less. And that is because I've built that relationship and people do trust me. And I genuinely feel like those buyers need to bid another 20 because it's the right property for them.
Yeah.
Like, it genuinely is. And there's nothing else for them to buy.
And they're always happy that they've gone that extra mile in terms of trying to secure the listing. What would you say? Because I still cringe when I go to auctions and I see agents standing behind the auctioneer, or there's like a row of agents. I think it's happening less and less now, but I think there is a natural fear for agents, particularly newer agents, as to approaching buyers during an auction. What would you say to a buyer beforehand? Because there's some that do require it. So there's some buyers that like it. There's some that it might be detrimental to actually helping them. But what are the, strategies you use to sidle up to a buyer during an auction, and what do you say to them?
So I think in the phone calls on a Friday, it starts there. Yeah. And the first question is, have you bid at an auction recently? And that's a really easy question to ask. And I think most buyers would say, no, I haven't bid at an auction recently. And so then you can go into how you can assist them. And you can actually say to them, listen, during the auction, if I feel there's any important information, can I just come and have a chat with you? Yeah, absolutely. So then that kind of gives you permission to go up to them.
Yep.
If you're actually just helping at an auction and you haven't been managing the campaign and you want to be seen to be doing something in the crowd, my favorite line is to obviously ask the managing agent who you should stand with.
Yep.
And then go up to people and say, hi, my name is Zali. I go to auctions every weekend. I know you probably don't. Can I help you?
Yep.
And it's just that. And people will say, no, don't help me. But normally they're so nervous. They want to see the numbers on the bidding record.
Yep.
And we still use paper.
Yep.
I haven't found an auction bidding app yet that I think works really well to be able to actually show people when you're there, this is where the bid's at. And quite often on the side, I will write, this is what you should bid, and put a number there.
Yep.
So, I feel like that is all part of the process.
We used a real-time agent for a number of years as well. And I think regardless of whether it's an app or a bidding sheet or an iPad, the easiest way I found is to actually lead with the iPad or lead with that bidding sheet.
Yes, correct.
And if they look like that they're not interested, you'll notice that they might be giving you the cold shoulder initially, but they'll start to occasionally just glance down and look at that iPad, and you'll say, you can sort of work your way into it. Oh, this is where the bid's at. Or another one that I used to always use when I was using pen and paper was I would say, I'll just do a tick when it's your bid, and I'll just do a cross if it's not your bid, just so you know where the bid's at. And it doesn't matter how hard they were to approach, they'd always say, oh, thanks for that. And then there's that you just chip it away, and eventually you get into that. So, look, I think that's a great listing tool to actually invite them and show your ability in the field to actually affect the price.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What would you say are some of the main reasons that agents miss listings?
Not listening is the key one. So a lot of agents go in there and talk, and they have their structure and they have their process, and they're not actually listening to what the client wants. So I think that's the biggest thing.
Yep.
Make sure you listen to what they want and what they need. I think the other thing is expecting that you're going to get it. That's probably the second one. You've been in touch with them for 3 or 4 years, and, you've built a good rapport with them. But let's be honest, if they're being friendly to you, they're being friendly to every agent. So, you've got to go into every single listing expecting that you are going to be competing against the best agents. I do compete against the best agents. I know you've had James Tostovan on this podcast and Ty. I compete with both of those agents regularly, right? And so I don't go into any listing thinking that I'm not up against the best. I'm up against the best. So it's just not being complacent. And the third one, I reckon, is not being organised and having that knowledge. So, you do not want to go into a listing not knowing what the house around the corner sold for, or what the fact that the house has got a heritage overlay or there's an easement on the back. You need to be fully prepared.
I think point 2 particularly is a big one. I have spoken to agents in the past where they'll say, oh, I'll be fine there. I'm going to get that. Oh, I've been in touch with them for 5 years. Well, the reality is, in our marketplace particularly, is that if you've been in touch with them for 5 years, someone else has probably been in touch with them for 5 years as well. James was a big proponent for it. He doesn't differentiate whether he's speaking with a mate or whether he's speaking with someone he's just met. he treats everyone like it's a competitive listing situation, which it sounds like you do as well.
Oh, 100%. And I've learnt that lesson a few times recently. Like one of my very good friends recently listed their house with a competitor, and that absolutely hurt my feelings. And I didn't even get in the door.
Yep.
And he was just like, he said to me, well, I just thought you were too busy. And so, it's something that you do learn over and over again in your career. You have to treat every single person like it's a competitive listing.
Touching on too busy, you, I'm sure, come up against, particularly with how many listings that you were handling at one time. I say that because obviously, speaking before this, you mentioned you'd taken a little bit of time off listing. You're back in the field now and having immediate success, which we all knew would happen. But when you are handling a number of listings, how do you get in front of that with a client? Do you assume that your competitors are going to use that against you and you bring it up, or do you just hope it doesn't get brought up in a listing presentation against you?
Oh, well, hope's not a strategy. So I think that all of my competitors bring it up,
yep.
But I am genuinely out there in the field every Saturday, every Thursday, so they can see me at those open for inspections.
Yep.
So I always say to them, well, if that's an issue then come to my opens, there's lots of my competitors who are not at their open for inspections,
yep.
Who do delegate it to junior agents. I also think that you have to focus on what is your market. So for example, I will be honest with people who are listing 1-bedroom apartments or 2-bedroom apartments. That's not my forte. Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm happy to oversee the campaign, but I'm not going to be at every open for inspection.
Yep.
I've got an apartment specialist who's really amazing at that. That's her focus, right? So I'm better off having her the face of that rather than myself. Whereas anything that is a house that's in my core area, that's what my specialty is. So I think it is really being clear about that. And it's also doing what you say you're going to do. If I do what I say I'm going to do, then people believe that. And the evidence is there.
Tell me about the evolution of Shelter. Obviously, competing against Shelter for many years, it was fun to watch the evolution of Shelter, obviously initially in Glen Iris and Ashburton and now moving down to Bayside as well. How has that changed your perspective on, having to run a business? You've got great support in the background with your husband, Danny, who is a big part of the business as well. How has that changed your perspective on listing and selling, or are you still just out in the field? Is that your role?
Yeah, so as we discussed before we started this, I took some time out off listing and selling last year. I'd worked 21 years, 6 days a week,
yep.
And I was just exhausted and wanted to experience what it was like to have a weekend. After, maybe 5 or 6 months of not having to work weekends, I realised I love open for inspections. Like that is my favorite part of my whole job is open for inspections. And so I've gone back to selling, and over the last 12 months, we've built up our leadership team even more. So there's, I'm obviously the face of the business, but Danny's the CEO. And then we've got Mane and Sarah who also run our operations and our sales team. I just came from a meeting with them where Mane reminded me, stay out of it, Zali. You just list and sell. We'll do the behind the scenes stuff. And I think that that's really what I'm focusing on now moving forward, because that's what I'm good at. It's what I love doing. I love my team, but they'll probably all admit I'm not the best at managing the team. So, I'm a real estate agent. So I'm just going to be a good real estate agent.
Focus on your strengths.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And my leadership team are amazing. My husband, Danny, always thought that he would be able to become a real estate agent too. And he listed one house and it was an absolute disaster.
If you're listening, mate, there you go. There's some real-time feedback.
He fully admits it. And he said after that, I'm never listing another house again. Because, his background and his expertise is running businesses. Yeah. So that's what he's good at.
What would you say your top 2 or 3, maybe 3 or 4 listing sources were? Is it OFIs? Is it cold calls? Is it, if you're going to start and you're starting again, what would you gravitate towards?
I I think, most of these podcast experience agents say, I get most of my listings from referrals. And I think that's really hard because as a new agent, you're like, well, how do I get referrals?
Sure.
So I think that the referrals are coming in thick and fast now, but that does come from the hard work before. So that comes from the letterbox drops, it comes from the cold calls, and it comes from the networking. I think networking at the moment is probably more important than agents realize.
Yep.
And I think that's how you can get ahead. So, not just sponsoring the fete, going to the fete, connecting with the people. I sponsored the bake sale at the local primary school, and I actually worked the whole day on the till at the bake sale because they asked me, they said they were running short of people. I said, yep. The amount of people that I met at that bake sale and, talked about cakes to, not about real estate, but now they know who I am.
Yeah.
So it's really about having those face-to-face interactions.
For sure. And I think the way that you've ingrained yourself in the community, that would be a major factor in terms of a listing source in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. But that does not negate your calls. So seriously, any of my team who are listening, you have to make the phone calls. That's whether it's database calls, whether it's cold calls, whatever it is, you have to make the calls. And the connection rate is so much lower than when we first started in real estate. So, we used to wait. I track everything, and I used to make 23 phone calls to get an appraisal. Now I reckon I've got to make like 40 or 50 phone calls to get an appraisal. So, the 100 calls, which has been talked about for years, is no longer 100. It's 150, it's 200. But you still have to do them.
That connection rate's interesting. I spoke to an agent only yesterday, and I said, because a lot of the calls that we make, if you built up a relationship, and I've had 16 years in real estate, so a lot of the calls you make are to people they'll see the phone ringing and they'll answer the call.
Yeah.
So I was sort of saying, I reckon you need 2 hours to make between 20 to 25 calls. And he said, mate, I make 50 to 60 in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Because I leave so many messages.
Yeah.
So you can do a lot more calls. What about text? Do you use text at all?
Yeah, I do. I don't like text. I love a long voicemail.
Yeah.
So but I do use text. I think particularly with the younger generation. So if I'm dealing with a younger demographic of buyer, I definitely use texts or voice notes.
Yep.
But I love a long voicemail, and quite often on the voicemail I will say, you don't call me back if you don't need to.
Yep.
But I know that I know they're going to listen to the voicemail, and so I try and make it as informative as I can.
I remember years ago when we spoke, and I'll get to accountability in a second because we did do a bit of accountability together at one stage. But I remember one of the things you used to say to me was, I would prefer to meet someone and them selling 5 years than them selling 1 year, because it gives me time to build a relationship.
Yeah.
Can you just, delve into that a little bit further in terms of that mentality? Because I think a lot of agents are keen for a quick fix.
Yeah.
They want to meet someone. They want to meet someone who's there to sell. But realistically, that process doesn't allow you to build that rapport, and it's more of a raffle than, say, if that person's going to sell in years to come.
Yeah. So if I'm competing against people, I know my commission's going to be stressed. I know I'm going to have to look at my advertising budget, and I know that I'm going to have to massage where I value the property to fit in with what other agents are saying.
Yep.
So, whereas if I've got a relationship and people trust me, I can ask for my full fee. I can recommend what I genuinely think is going to get them the best price in terms of advertising, and the best strategy in terms of pricing as well. And so I think building that relationship is much more profitable over the long term. And, if you are only in this business for a year or two, there's so many more easier ways to earn money than there is in real estate for a year or two. If you're in it for the long term, it's a freaking great industry to be in, but you have to have a long-term view.
I want to talk about accountability and also training. Two
Yes.
things that I love.
Me too.
I'm a bit of a sicko for them, particularly training, scripts and dialogues. And I think we were very lucky in terms of
So
our
lucky.
Exposure to the one and only James Tostovan. I had, I think, about 8 or 9 years in his team. You would have been, what, six
Not
or
quite. I think I was like 4
or 5 years in his
Yeah,
team.
but obviously 8 years at Marshall White.
Yeah,
So.
I don't think I have learned more in my career in terms of listing and selling, but also scripts and dialogues than working with him at that time. Tell me about your training with your team currently. Do you do scripts and dialogues training? Because I think now what I find is that less and less agents are keen to do scripts and dialogues training. They think, I don't want to say the wrong thing in front of my peers, or I don't want to be judged for saying the wrong thing. And you and I both know that's how you grow.
Correct.
That's how you learn. Are you finding the same thing?
100%. So we were doing training on a Thursday morning. I made it at 9:00 so that everybody could come, because people don't like to come early. And I just wasn't getting the turnout. I wasn't getting the response or the feedback. People weren't really enjoying it. So actually, like 3 weeks ago, I ditched it and said, you know what, stuff it. I'm not wasting my hour of my day on a Thursday. If you want to do it, we're going to do scripts and dialogue logs at 8:00 on a Tuesday. And at the moment, I've run that for 3 weeks and I've literally just had like 2 people turn up.
Yeah.
So, but I can tell you right now, the training that those 2 people are getting for, the rest of their career, they're going to, slingshot through the ranks. I did so much scripts and dialogues training, not just with JT, but also, with my previous job when I was at Jellis Craig. It was mandatory to sit down and actually do scripts and dialogues with someone. And, I still practice it today. Like, JT taught me, you walk out of every single appraisal and you ask the person you went with, what did I do that I could improve on? And even if it's, and I still ask the guys that I go in with, what can I do that I can improve on? And it means just a slight tweak here or a slight tweak there, something you didn't notice or you didn't think of can always improve.
I think it comes across in the way that you just speak to me now. I think it, and I found it massively helpful with auctioneering as well, because you always feel like you're equipped with the right answer.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what someone throws at you. You've got an answer for that, and you are able to articulate that in a succinct manner. I think the one of the biggest things that our industry faces now is, and I think it's a community issue, people don't like getting feedback.
They don't. It really bothers me. The quickest way for any young agent to improve is to go to the best agent in their office and say, hey, can I buy you breakfast, one morning a week or one morning a month, and can you just do scripts and dialogues with me and pick at me? But just, you have to say to them, listen, I'm open to that criticism, right? Because I'm willing to give that criticism to people and they can make those changes quickly, but I'm too scared to give it. Yeah. I'm too scared to say it because people get offended, they get upset, there's HR issues around it all. But if you really want to improve, give the person in your office who is really good at their job permission to criticize, but not just to be mean, for improvement.
Yeah. I went to some training a year ago. It was like sort of scripts and dialogues training where agents were asked to deliver a presentation. And after every presentation, it was clap, clap, clap. That was amazing. Oh, that was so good how you did this. That was so great. And some of them were good, but some of them were atrocious. And just the lack of honest feedback for that agent, because that agent is then going to walk into a living room and deliver that same listing presentation, and you think, gee, their strike rate could be so much better if they were open to improvement. It's not criticism, it's constructive feedback.
It is. And I also think that a lot of agents, when they do scripts and dialogues, they think about practicing the listing presentation, and that's all they think about, right? And you can have the best listing presentation, but if you can't get in the doors, there's no use. Nobody practices getting indoors, and that's an art form. Getting indoors at open for inspections, that's a challenge I've set myself recently, where I want to get in the door, book the appointment while I'm at the open for inspection, and I'm having so much fun with it, and I'm getting in more doors because it's really a challenge I've set for myself. So I think, if you're going to start with scripts and dialogues, start with getting indoors and buddy up with someone who's not going to let you in the door, and wear them down and figure out, okay, how could I have said that for you to open up to me or whatever. I think that's something that people need to focus on too.
So let's have some fun with it. I am.
You did not tell me we were going to do this.
No, I didn't. But I'll give you one example, because I know that you're well equipped for this. So I'm, let's say I've gone into the house, I've left the house, Zali, the house is okay. Not too bad.
So we're at an open for inspection.
We're at an open for inspection.
Okay.
Yep. So I sort of like the house, but I'm not sure if it was for me.
Okay, so it's not for you, or it might be worth consideration?
Oh, look, we'll give it some consideration. I'm not sure if we're sort of ready to do anything yet. We're just sort of getting ideas at this stage.
Okay. Do you live in the area, Michael?
Yeah, we live in Glen Iris.
Oh, okay. What street are you in? I live in Glen Iris too.
We're in Howard Street.
Oh, fantastic. That's excellent street. I don't know if you noticed, but I recently sold one in Britton Street off market. It got over 4 million and it was a really good result.
I didn't see that.
Yeah. It was an off-market sale. I had a really good buyer, introduced it to the owner and ended up selling it without having to have a campaign. So what number in Howard Street are you?
We're 16, but we're just sort of not sure whether we're going to buy or sell first at this stage.
Yeah, okay. 16, that's towards the top of the street. That's fantastic.
Yep.
Well, would it be helpful at all if I popped over and gave you an idea of where you might sit from a price point of view?
We did have another agent through about 12 months ago.
Yeah.
So I think we've got somewhat of an idea.
Yeah, okay. I mean, obviously the market has changed quite a bit in the last 12 months. We've had an election, we've had 2 interest rate drops. So, probably be good to have a little bit of an update.
Yep.
And also, I'd love to kind of help you find something to buy. And by seeing what you've currently got, I really get a good gauge on what is going to suit you for the next house. So it'll only take like 10, 15 minutes. I'm actually in Britton Street to do the final inspection next week on Tuesday. Why don't I just pop over after that?
Okay.
Excellent.
That sounds fine. But I think that's great. I appreciate you doing that because I did spring that on you on the spot.
You did.
But I think one of the key things to take away there is the fact that you're always going to get challenged. And I purposely just said, look, we've had an appraisal 12 months ago. And a lot of average agents or agents who may be less bullish will just say, oh, not a problem at all and move on to the next question. But I think pushing in a delicate way, I didn't feel too cornered that I had to say yes. But I think it's great to have fun with it. And I think with open for inspections, it's so easy for us to fall into the trap of it's just a Saturday of opens, get the name and number, find out whether someone's interested in a property. Someone recently said to me, imagine if you had every single conversation you had, imagine if you asked every single person you spoke to, everyone, if they wanted an appraisal. Every single person you spoke to.
Yeah.
Your appraisal rate would lift dramatically. Now,
huge.
Realistically, it shouldn't be tough to remember, but it's tough to stay on the ball that time. Imagine if every prospecting call, you said, hey, just wondering, would an update be helpful at the moment?
Yeah.
Would you benefit from an update on the value? And you did that at every single time. Just imagine.
I don't know if you remember when we were working in the same office and I had on my phone handle ATFQ. Do you remember that?
I think I know what it might stand for.
Yeah. And it's just a reminder, like what we're aiming for is to get indoors.
Yeah.
So stop being scared. Just ask the question.
Yeah. I think being scared, that apprehension, it doesn't just fall into asking to get in the door. It falls into telling a vendor if a property's on or off track. It falls into delivering what you think a reserve might be before an auction.
I'm still scared of doing those things, I'll be honest.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, particularly if you get it wrong, particularly if you say to somebody, oh, I think your house is worth 3 million, and then the feedback from buyers is terrible and it's only worth 2.7, 2.8, because let's face it, we all do get it wrong sometimes. Sometimes you fall in love with a house more than the buyers fall in love with a house, or something comes up that's, unusual, or, Trump imposes tariffs and nobody wants to buy. So I absolutely still get scared. So I, quite often, I'll have a pep talk with, the guys in my team and, they'll say, come on, you can do it. Like sometimes you just need that support to, have that hard conversation.
And I think sometimes you sit back and you'll say, well, why didn't you just get a price reduction? Or why didn't you say that to that person? And then you actually look at your own properties and the properties you're handling and you think, well, the same could be said for mine. So I think sometimes it's good to take stock, sit back and say, okay, well, how am I best going to get these properties sold? Social media, what's your strategy around that? Do you have one? Do you need to improve it? What does it look like? Because we saw Lana Samuels speak at AREC this year, and she's obviously got a very, very big presence on social media. It's probably her largest listing tool. Do you have a strategy around it? How do you think it compares to good old-fashioned phone calls? What is your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I definitely think you need to have some type of strategy around it. I'll tell you what my strategy is. My strategy is do it when I feel good, because to be honest, social media makes me feel really crap. Mm-hmm. I think it's really easy to go on there and look at, agents who are posting this, sold that. They look amazing. They're in expensive cars. And I think it can really get people down. It gets me down. Mm-hmm. So I don't like it. from that aspect. So I do it, but I do it when I feel good, and I try and post things that I think are going to interest me and interest my tribe. So I resonate with middle-aged white women. That's what I just seem to resonate with that, kind of market, which is me. We love interior design. We love doing yoga. We love going to Pilates. We love fashion. So I just try and post what works for me and what is, I think, going to be interesting for the people that follow me. I do get leads from social media, but they're normally from people that I already know that are already on my database. So it's just a way for people to really get to know who I am in a more intimate way, without having to actually have that phone conversation or meet me. So it's definitely not my biggest source of leads. It's not what I'm good at. I try and focus on what I am good at, and social media is not one of those things. I realize that, so I don't focus on it too much.
It's interesting talking about it making you feel good and not feel good. That's fascinating. I haven't heard that aspect of it before, because we've got an agent within our ranks, Luke Saville, who's big on social media.
Yeah.
But I think one of the biggest differences I see between Luke and the average agent is that nearly all of his content is value add to a customer.
Yeah.
So it's not, look at this property I've just sold. It's, hey, the government's changed, or the government's been re-elected, or this is how it's going to affect first home buyers, for example. And so all of it is relevant to his marketplace.
Yes.
But he loves doing it. So that's, coming back to you saying, well, look, it's not something that I love doing. It'd be like if you just didn't like being a real estate agent.
Exactly.
You probably wouldn't be as good as a real estate agent.
Yeah, you got to do what you love and find your niche. There's so many different sources where you can prospect and list. So find what you're really good at and you enjoy, and do that.
Yeah. Two more things I want to cover. Accountability is one of them.
Yes.
I know that we used to do accountability. I think the good old fashioned, I think Peter Vagano, of all people, he's had that many accountability partners.
I was one of them. Yeah.
Where he's met with them at a cafe, in fact, a car wash rather. They do the car wash on Friday or Saturday morning. They do the accountability. I think he used to meet with Carla Feder as well. I think you might have been the OG of that, the original one. But for young agents, how does accountability help them in terms of their career?
Oh, it's crucial. It's absolutely crucial, I think, when you're a young agent, because you don't know who to compare yourself against. And, we hear the old line all the time, don't compare your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 20. So I think it's really important to have someone who's on the same type of level as you, and make sure that you are on track at the stage that you should be on track. It's also good to have someone who's going to pull you up, and I think, like, obviously you and I were accountability buddies for a while, and you're not afraid to say to me, Zali, get out of your own head, you stop being so silly, and I think that you have to have that person who's willing to have that honest conversation with you, and vice versa as well, because it's all for improvement and all for your growth. So it's absolutely crucial.
Yeah. And in those sessions, you're covering calls, you're covering appraisals, you're setting targets for one another.
Yes.
Obviously targets for yourself, but joint targets to, I guess, meet on a minimum standard or a weekly standard in order to make sure that you're both progressing in the direction that you want to.
Exactly. And I also think the other two things I think that are really important in that meeting are wins. So because you have to celebrate the wins. I think that's something that a lot of people forget to do, is celebrate the wins that you have, and also the challenges. So talk about what challenges you've got, because another person might have a completely different take on a challenging listing, a challenging vendor, or even something in your personal life that's challenging.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. One other question, and this is a question we've asked every single person who's come in, and we will continue to ask. I think I might create a bit of a leaderboard for it. Who is the greatest real estate agent that Australia has ever produced?
Ooh, ever produced. So I'm going to go with two, because you said the word greatest. So I'm defining the greatest as someone who, obviously lists a lot and sells a lot of property, but also is really good in other areas as well. And so I'm not narrowing it down to one. I want to go with two. First is Steph Dobro, who, as you know, is a very good friend of mine. She writes amazing numbers. She also runs a phenomenal business. But not only that, she's managed to grow a team of agents who also, many of whom write seven figures.
Sure.
And I just don't know anybody else in the business who is a multi-million-dollar writer and also has the time and the effort and the leadership skills to train multi-million-dollar writers.
Yep.
So she is one of them. And the second one is Leanne Drury. So many of you may or may not have heard of her. She's a multi-million-dollar agent who sells property in Mackay in Queensland.
Yep.
Average sale price in Mackay is less than $500,000. And she writes many millions every year. And I just don't know how she does it. She's a mum. She's a partner. I just think that's amazing. It's really easy to choose the best agents from the city.
Yep.
And I think we forget about some of the regional agents who are doing amazing things with less, essentially.
Sure. Yeah.
So they're my two.
Well, that's great because now we've got. Unfortunately for you, I'm going to recognise both. And I'm going to say the name you took first because that's going to be added to the leaderboard. So Steph, you can win that one.
Okay.
Leanne, great to hear that you're doing excellent things in Mackay. We've had a multitude of different answers at the moment, but no one has come up twice, which is interesting.
Oh, that's good.
So fascinating. Zali, thank you so much for your time. I think there's a lot of people out there who are going to get a lot out of what we've spoken about today. And I have a sneaky feeling that after this, I'm going to get requests from people to have you on again. So at some stage down the track, I will be very much doing that, and perhaps we can delve into a bit more of those scripts and dialogues you talked about.
Thank you. Thanks, Woody. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
I'm Michael Wood from the agency. We've got Zali Reynolds from Shelter. Thanks so much. The Real Talent Podcast is brought to you by The Agency, Australia's real estate.